So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. I see we still have people who are logging in. It's exactly 1 p.m. Eastern time. So appreciate everybody being so prompt. We've already have more than 250 people signed in, but let's wait a minute and then we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. Okay, so I see it's a minute after the hour. I know that other folks are continuing to join, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Samantha Carrier, and I manage Nacha's Consulting Group. And on behalf of the team, want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, which is Next Gen ACH Compliance. The event today is hosted by our consulting team, and we're excited to have one of our preferred partners as a presenter today, the founder and CEO of Azimuth, Rohin Tagra, as well as Carrie Sellen, a lead consultant for the Nacha Consulting team. And we'll get to hear from both of them shortly. But before that, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Our webinar today will run approximately 40 minutes and is being recorded for future reference. So if you signed up for the webinar today, you will be sent a link to the audio recording of the event, so you have that for reference. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we will be sure to leave time at the end of the webinar for questions. But if you want to use the chat feature during the discussion to post a question, you're certainly welcome to do so. And this is not meant to be super formal in format. So if you post a question and it makes sense to incorporate it during the webinar, we will certainly do that. Otherwise, we'll take questions at the end. So our plan today is to have a discussion among the panelists and also show a short demo. I think with that, we can go ahead and get started. Clearly, based on the number of attendees who registered for this webinar and have signed in, compliance is a hot topic that's top of mind. And I think, what we're seeing from the consulting group's perspective is that for today's, whether it's a financial institution, a business, technology providers, et cetera, we're all pushing to keep ahead of the trends. We're trying to improve customer experience. We're trying to meet customer expectations, and we're doing all of that while also prioritizing compliance, which can be a challenge. So I think, again, that question of how can I provide my customer with the highest level of ACH product and service and have that experience be superior and also remain compliant across my entire organization as payment system rules and regs and laws continuously evolve and change is something that lots of folks are dealing with. Within the consulting group, compliance is certainly one of the key areas where we work with organizations, particularly as they roll out new products. And I would say it's some of the most interesting work that we get to do, whether it's advising a financial institution on a new offering or a fintech with a new product that's looking to shake up the payments ecosystem. I think the need to focus on compliance is the same. And the focus of our webinar today is really around taking compliance to another level and using technology to do so. And really asking the question, how can technology assist in some of these various aspects of compliance? So with that, let me ask a question of Carrie Sellen, who I mentioned is on the consulting team. And Carrie, from your perspective and from an ACH perspective, maybe just to get things started, curious to hear from you sort of what you see based on your experience, clients, et cetera, as some of those key compliance challenges, whether it's a bank or a technology provider.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, Samantha. I'm happy to join as a panelist. This is a really hot topic, as you mentioned, because we do see a lot of companies that come to us regarding ACH compliance. So from an ACH compliance perspective, there are numerous state and federal laws and regulations and rules that financial institutions need to ensure it complies with based on the types of ACH transaction it processes. Some of the legal requirements include the Nacha Operating Rules, Uniform Commercial Code Article 4A, ACH Operating Rules, circulars, agreements, the Green Book, Reg CC, Reg E, state EFT laws, and several others. There are also requirements regarding privacy, data security, UDAP, OFAC, BSA AML, and the U.S. Patriot Act that span across multiple payment types. So you can see there's a long list of requirements that financial institutions have to comply with. They also have to stay informed of the changes to current laws, regulation, and rules, and any new ones that impact the institution. You can imagine this task can be quite daunting. Technology providers that offer processing and services to financial institutions or other participants in the ACH payments ecosystem must ensure their systems and processes comply with the laws, regulation, and rules. As Nacha Consulting, we do help a lot of different fintechs and technology providers ensuring that their processes and systems comply with the rules. Another challenge is the compliance officers need to understand all the legal requirements, but they also have to ensure the staff understands how it applies to the tasks they perform and ensures they have the proper controls to mitigate the institution's risk. Staff members must understand how the legal requirements apply to their functions and what they need to do to ensure compliance, and that they have the proper controls in place.
Yeah, and as I'm listening to you speak, that complexity that surrounds compliance really comes through. And curious, some of the things that you described, would you say that they're ACH specific or kind of more payment system specific in terms of those complexities?
I think as far as the payment systems in general, I think they all have their own different rules and regulations. So, for example, card products have to comply with private sector rules such as MasterCard and Visa rules, Reg II. Credit cards have to comply with Truth in Lending Act, debit and access devices with Reg E, just to name a few. Every payment product has rules or regulations that needs to be followed to ensure that all the participants in the payment ecosystem understands how to process their transactions and their responsibilities, risks, and liabilities.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me loop Rohin into the discussion here. And Rohin, if you want to introduce yourself and give the group a little bit of background to start, I think that would be great. But I would just love to hear a little bit of your story, if you will, and how you personally got into the compliance space.
Great. Thanks, Samantha. And thank you to you and to Nacha for hosting this hot topic webinar and having us on the panel with you.
Absolutely.
How I got into compliance. I started Azimuth in 2017 to solve a problem that I was facing when I was on the banking industry side. So I spent most of my career with Bank of America, JP Morgan, and in those roles, there were a number of times that we were dealing with regulatory issues, dealing with consent orders, or just on a day-to-day basis, managing compliance with laws, rules, regs. And it was a very challenging task. And so we were doing it manually. We were spending a lot of time and money preparing for audits, preparing for regulator reviews, or ensuring that we were compliant, and also communicating the same information across to different teams. These laws and rules and regs are very interesting, as they're not structured the way the operations are. And so it may take a number of folks or groups within the organization to comply with those. And that's one of the challenges we were having, was ensuring that we knew who was doing exactly what and when. And so that was what led me to drive this. We were having trouble, again, with those audits and driving consistency. And so as we were trying to solve for this, I went out into the marketplace looking for technology. And as you can imagine, coming from those large institutions, we had an open checkbook to solve this highly critical problem. And as we went out in the marketplace, I was not finding any software or a solution that would help us do this. There were things that we were trying to piece together, where we're bringing the data of the rules into a system, as well as then trying to tie expertise content into that. And we were not able to find something. So after about the third time of trying to look for something, that's when I stepped out in 2017 and decided to go build this to solve a problem on a larger part for the industry.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what sort of industry or vertical did you tackle first? Because I don't think ACH is your first offering. I'm just curious, what did you tackle first from a compliance standpoint?
So we tackled mortgage first, and the reason for that is mortgage is a highly regulated and complex environment from the number of laws and regs that apply at the federal level, as well as the state level. At times there's conflicting regulations and statutes between state and federal. And so our thought process behind that was, hey, if we can tackle mortgage, then you can tackle just about any business line or vertical within the banking space, and then beyond from there. So we've tackled mortgage first, and then we've moved into the payment space now. And
yeah, that's cool.
And then one thing I was going to say is we're very excited to launch the ACH payments Nacha solution within the Azimuth platform that we're launching out this month and kicking it off with this webinar.
Yeah, so in terms of what the solution brings to the table from an ACH perspective, and we're going to give folks an opportunity to see it firsthand here shortly with the demo. What was the approach in terms of ACH, and what really does the product bring, from a technology perspective and a compliance enhancement perspective, vis-a-vis ACH?
That's a great question, Samantha. So when we went to tackle this problem, what we were focused on was really taking the manual efforts and the volume of data that exists out there in terms of what you have to comply with and automating that. And so we were focused on making it more efficient, but also giving organizations the ability to cover much more ground through technology versus some of the manual aspects that may be utilized today. And so the way I sum up what we have is we've got data, content, and software within our platform. So the three things that I was trying to have to piece together when I was on the industry side is what we've built a solution around. And so from a data standpoint, what we do is we bring in for the ACH product here, we bring in all the Nacha rules, and we've turned those into data. So we've turned each of the rules into an individual data record. And the reason that's important is now it allows us to drive that into the workflow. But another key piece of that is we've worked with your team and Carrie and her team on taking the Nacha rules and turning those into a checklist of what you must do to comply with those. And so partnering with the Nacha Consulting team has been fantastic. And the content, I think, that's in there really helps an organization quickly understand, what they need to do to comply with each of those rules. The other key piece we've done is we've broken it out by the participant type. So now what we're doing is narrowing down the set of rules that apply to you based off of if you're an RDFI, an ODFI, a third-party sender, and so on, as well as giving you that checklist so that's easily, what you have to do.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Then,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. That was the last thing I was going to say. And then we give you workflow to map your controls. So your policies, procedures, systems, and how you're complying with it. So I guess in a nutshell, it's taken a lot of these processes, which tend to be manual in nature or done through spreadsheets or SharePoint or maybe some application that's not typically meant for it, but we pieced it all into one place. And so you've got a solution, one repository to go to.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Carrie, I'm just curious, and I know you're very familiar with the solution and what went into developing it on the Azimuth side. Just curious, as the product was being developed and as you were advising Azimuth, what's your perspective on a tool like this, just based on your experience in the industry and some of the things that we've seen with clients?
Well, I think that the key thing to me is that a lot of times the clients will read a Nacha operating rule, but they don't really understand how it applies to them directly. So through this tool, we were able to write the actual requirements for each rule. And then, as Rohin said, it actually ties to the participant in the ACH network as well. So if this rule applies to an originator or to a third-party sender, to an ODFI, RDFI, etc., it's very easy for them to go in, identify what rules apply to that participant, and then how to apply those rules in plain speak English, so that they can implement the procedures and processes that they need to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so I actually think what would be interesting at this point is to go ahead and let folks take a look at it and get that sense of the offering. But before we do that, Rohin, maybe just one more question for you. As you designed the product and built in, these operational procedures and checklists, et cetera, would you say that you built it with a specific audience in mind? I know you come from a large bank background, but curious sort of who you were thinking of as end users or potential end users as you built the product.
So when we think about the organizations that it would apply to, it covers the gamut from small to large. If you're in the payments business, the rules apply to you. Now, there may be different sets based off of the type of business that you are, but this has been meant for organizations of all sizes. It could be for someone that's a fintech that's starting out and creating an innovative solution, as you were talking about earlier, Samantha. It could be for a mid-sized bank organization, payment processor, or a large bank. It's just the different rules that may apply, but the product is definitely meant to cover anyone that's in the payments organization the way we've designed it, and then with the expertise and the content that Nacha Consulting has provided that we've added into the platform.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I think it's helpful. And, when I was looking through the list of folks that had registered for the event today, I thought one of the things that was so great is, the very wide variety of organizations represented. There's large banks that are on today. There's mid-sized banks, there's credit unions, there's technology providers, there's law firms. So I love the wide variety of attendees because I agree, that compliance piece certainly applies to the full ecosystem. So I know you have a member of your team that's on with us today, Jen Graves, who's going to be giving folks a look at the product, and we certainly didn't want today's session to be kind of a death by PowerPoint or the longest demo of your life. We really just wanted to take a look at technology as a way to enhance compliance. And with that, I want to head over to Jen Graves with Azimuth and let her show you a little bit about the product and how it works. So thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Samantha. Good afternoon. I'm Jen Graves, Director of Program Management. Yes?
Jen, we're seeing your PowerPoint, not your...
Yeah.
Your...
Yes. One moment.
Always hiccups in the live moment. That's okay, Jen, take your time. There we go.
Okay, and we can see the application?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So first I'd like to walk you through the framework of Azimuth GRC, our Omnia product. This is the platform that houses the inventory of Nacha rules and guidelines with the operational requirements. Azimuth GRC has a unique ingestion process by way of converting the Nacha rules and guidelines into data. The process takes large groupings of text and parses each line and paragraph into individual line items. To assist our users in navigating through the Nacha rules and guidelines, each item is mapped to a category. This helps for finding search results and/or finding sets of rules and guidelines associated to a specific category or categories. In partnership with Nacha, the guidance of an accredited ACH professional in the payments industry, Nacha's very own Carrie Sellen, we are able to offer an exclusive operating checklist. In the example of 3.3, timing requirements for RDFI to make credit and debit entries available, this section is made up of multiple sections and subsections. Each section or subsection will have specific requirements, providing additional guidance on how the user can maintain compliance. Multiple requirements may be linked to each section or subsection to help ensure that all key areas for compliance are outlined. For example, if we look at 3.3.1, this has 7 different unique requirements. These requirements are a beneficial resource to help you, the user, to gain more insight into written rules and guidelines. Azimuth GRC uses process mapping as a tool to drive specific rules and guidelines to a company process. Each section is mapped to an internal Azimuth process, and the Azimuth process is mapped to a company process. There may be one or multiple mappings dependent on the context of the rule or the guideline. To help better explain, I'll show you a brief example of the mapping process. As a user, your company can define your own process hierarchy and will map to our Azimuth processes. Mappings can have a one-to-one relationship, such as our legal to agreements, or a one-to-many relationship, as we have our ACH Operations Manager mapped to 3 of our different Azimuth processes. The next product for review is our Lineage. This utilizes the codified Nacha rules and guidelines with requirements and creates end-to-end traceability for reviews and assessments specified to each company process. We'll continue with our example of 3.3. We'll see that this section is mapped to multiple company processes. Legal has validated that 3 of those requirements are applicable. These requirements are then mapped to an artifact. As Rohin had stated, an artifact can either be a process, procedure, report, or any other form of documentation. Each applicable rule requirement will be assessed for operational and customer impact. Artifacts will have section references to give context on how compliance is being met. And additionally, within the assessment, the user has the ability to identify and report gaps if found. Lineage offers a dashboard reporting providing a visual snapshot of workflow status. Each graph is interactive with drill down capabilities in order to see your workflow status. Lineage also has a work queue that is tailored to each user based on company assigned processes and roles. The workflow begins with the user validating responsibility and applicability of the requirements. Each applicable requirement will then be mapped to one or more artifacts. Artifacts will be assessed, identifying any gaps, impacts, and context. When submitted for approval, only those with the approver role can review and approve to completion. As a quick recap, Azimuth GRC, in partnership with Nacha, has expanded on the rules and guidelines with operational requirements to help ensure compliance for every ACH payment, also offering a workflow application for end-to-end traceability to your company process. Another key benefit to highlight is that any changes to the rules or guidelines are identified within the application, redlined, and sent to impacted company processes. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to demo our exclusive Nacha products within Omnia and Lineage. I'll turn the conversation back to Samantha, Carrie, and Rowan for questions and comments.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing your ACH focused compliance product with us. And again, you know, I think what we've really been trying to get at today is that possibility of enhancing compliance and really what's sort of, you know, out there as next gen options for organizations, whether they're small or large, that are looking to conform with the Nacha Operating Rules and other payment system rules, because I think the product can weave both in. Carrie, any thoughts from your perspective? I mean, you're a lifetime AAP, and you certainly, you know, work with companies regularly who are trying to comply with the Nacha Operating Rules. Any thoughts from your end?
Well, one thing that came to my mind is if you think about this from other people in the organization, such as an internal or external auditor, or maybe a regulator, it's very easy for an organization to be able to go into the system and be able to pull up, you know, the different controls that they have for different processes across the organization. As we know, there's different groups that can handle processes for the ACH. You have your information technology that has to comply with rules regarding the file formats, matching return files back up to original items. You have the operations teams that have to do exception processing, return, dishonors, stuff like that. So because it's so complex across an entire organization, I think the tool also allows, and it might not have been apparent on the screens that Jen was showing, that you can actually pull up the information and see where each requirement sits in the organization. And I think that's key.
Yeah, agreed. Rohin, any thoughts from your perspective? And then what we can do is certainly open it up to folks who might have questions. We've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah,
left.
I was going to add on to those thoughts in terms of Carrie, in terms of, you know, this is a collaborative application that can be used but from all different ends, from risk, from compliance, from the operations team to the audit team, where it's got all the information in it, from the rule to what it means to comply with that rule, to the controls that you have mapped to it, which groups are doing which portions of it. So it really brings that collaboration into one platform, as well as your integrated data through those pieces in there. Another key piece, I know we hit on that one place on the category where we walk through agreements. If you think about managing this type of data and saying, hey, I want to know all my agreements, or I want to know all my ODF requirements or this requirements, you've got that at your fingertips. So there's a large amount of data that becomes available for analysis as well, using the Azimuth platform.
And Rohan, I'll add to that. I think another piece that comes to my mind is if there's gaps from a compliance officer perspective or a control officer, I would want to know where are the gaps so that I can ensure that they get remediated.
Yeah, and we didn't show you this piece of it, and so it was meant to be, you know, just to give you some of the highlights. But if there are gaps, then we've also got the capability in the application for you to build an action plan against those and track against that action plan to ensure the gaps are getting closed or remediated. So that's a great point, Carrie.
So if you're on the call and or the webinar and you want to ask any questions about the demo or anything else that's ACH compliance related and technology related around that, you can go ahead and type in any questions that you have. One that I would start with is just kind of curious, you know, how software like this is different than, say, simply buying, you know, the operating rules, either, you know, the beloved printed book or a subscription to the online rules. And Carrie, I know you're familiar with all of the various offerings, whether they're Nacha assets or the Azimuth product. You know, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I think this just broadens that. So not only does it have a copy of the Nacha Operating Rules in there, but it also takes and breaks them down, as we've talked about, so that you can digest each piece and make sure that it's assigned to the proper group, and it allows you to do all that tracking, put in your controls. So it's more of a much broader compliance program than just having the Nacha Operating Rules. It also gives you the requirements. So, you know, like I said before, one of the things that comes up periodically is people will say, well, how do I comply with this rule? I read what it says, but how do I comply with it? So in this process, we tried to write the requirements of how you can apply to the rules in plain English speak as much as we could.
Yeah.
So I think all those things, the package is what makes it different.
Yeah. So it's more than the rules, really. It's about operational requirements and traceability and checklists and things like that that are included. Okay. So I'm again, I'll encourage anybody who wants to ask a question to do so. Otherwise, we will be respectful and mindful of your time and wrap it up. But if you do have a question and you want to go ahead and use the chat feature, you are welcome to do so. And I think there's one that's there. I'm just trying to look. I'm trying to. So, okay, the question is, does the program provide best practices along with the actual rules?
So it provides the rules are in there, and those requirements, in essence, would be a version of what I would think is best practice, right? We've worked with the Nacha Consulting team and Carrie and team to define what it means to comply with that. And so there's not a best practice saying you should use a policy or a procedure, but it's breaking down that Nacha rule in terms of what you need to do to comply with that. So you're not having to go through that analysis of, hey, what does this mean? But it lays that out within the platform and then allows you to connect how you're complying with it.
And I'll expand just a little bit on some of the things Rohin said. So there is going to be things in there that says, you know, it's a best practice to make sure that you reconcile your ACH files, you know, on a daily basis or as the files come in. So there are going to be best practices in there that, you know, there's not going to be a hard rule that says you must balance your files. So there is best practices in there that says how you want to make sure that you manage these things. So there are best practices included in the requirements.
Thanks, Carrie. And Luis, you saw another question, is that right?
There's a few questions in there. So let's start with risk management services. Is that part of the application as well?
There are, that was a little tough depending on how we're defining the risk management services. We do have another module that's related to operational risk management where you can do risk assessments. So from that basis, yes. And then if it's the services component, that's where we partner up with the Nacha Consulting team to help with the implementation. So when you think about an implementation of getting the rules down to your operations, I mean, that can happen within a couple of days that you've got all the rules that apply to each one of your departments in your taxonomy and with that workflow ready to go. And now if there's some assistance that's needed around mapping your controls or identifying what's the best way to implement that in your operating environment, that's where we work with the Nacha Consulting team on that.
Thanks, Rohin. A number of these questions are similar, but this one kind of stands out. Could we use, the Azimuth GRC for example, for like annual ACH compliance audit? Is it something that we can use for that or a companion to that event?
Yes, 100%. So if you've mapped the rules down into your operations, map your controls, think about when you prepare for an audit, you're now going to have all that at your fingertips. You'll be able to push a button and get the different controls, and within those controls, how those are aligning to the requirements that you're meeting, or that you're having to comply with. So yes, it can be used for an audit, and I think it actually makes for a stronger collaboration between the auditor and the organization because of the way the information is output.
Thanks, Rohin. A few more here. Does Azimuth offer origination documentation tracking, for example, third-party documentation audit, self-audit data?
So if we are looking, I guess a couple of different pieces. From an audit standpoint on the rules based off your controls, yes. From the ability to test those rules, that is on our roadmap. So we built that testing of rules within the mortgage platform. What we now will do with the Nacha piece is we take that rule and then we'll write a formula on that and map those to your data elements. And then you can test your transactions to see if they're in compliance with that. That is a roadmap item for us. It's just defining those formulas, but we built that functionality out already within the platform for the mortgage platform, for the mortgage business.
Thank you. And this one has a similar theme to some in the past. And really it's about the application. The registrar would like to know, is it just like a one-for-one, like word translation from the Nacha rule book, or do you translate it into like a simpler English and best practices?
I'm going to let Carrie answer that, since she's the expert on that one.
So the requirements have been written in more what I would consider English instead of the regulatory type or rule language that the rules are written in, to help the person understand what that rule is actually saying.
And I think I'm going to jump in too, Carrie. I think one of the things that the product addresses, in my view, really nicely is what you've touched on, which is, so I see the language in the rule, or I see a new rule update or rule change, and I understand what it's saying, but I still need to convert that, if you will, or apply that to operations. And so I think that one of the things the product does is sort of bridge rules language, to your point, and then making that connection to an operational requirement, which is different, right? And it's doing so, to your point, in as much sort of plain speak language as possible.
And the one other thing I add to that, Samantha, is it's the example that Jen showed in the demo. You saw how that one subsection within 331 had, when it was in requirements, had 7 requirements. So if you think about it from a reading a rule standpoint and then trying to implement it in your operations, if you don't break that out into those 7 individual requirements, then there's a very high probability of missing something. And that's actually one of the issues I used to see a lot when I was on the banking side, is we thought we were covered, but there were so many requirements just within a specific area that you did 3 or 4 of them and you missed the last 2. So that's the other advantage of this, is it actually takes it down, defines it into those requirements, but also breaks it into those individual requirements that you have to comply with.
Right. So Luis, I know we're at our end time in terms of what we had put out to folks who signed up. Is there a last question you want to share? Since I can't see the questions for some reason.
Sure. A few more came in, but I'll ask. Let's see here. A few of these are around the same topic. So it revolves around as rules change. How does the app, update that their new rules? If there's some information you can share in terms of new rules and how the updates are applied and then communicated to clients.
Yes. So what we will do is, as new rules are published, we bring those into the platform. We redline those changes, and again, we didn't show that piece here, and we can. If there's someone interested in a larger demo, how we redline those changes. And because we've written these requirements at the subsection level, we know exactly which subsection changed. So then we'll work with the Nacha Consulting team to update those requirements into that plain business language. And now that you've mapped your controls at the requirement level, you'll know exactly what controls are impacted. So you get the changes at a red line standpoint. We'll communicate those changes into your environment, won't push them in, you accept them. And then you've got a streamline automated impact assessment as well to your control level. That's a great question.
Yeah, so that happens pre-rule update. So there's time for the customer to see that there's changes coming and give them an opportunity to make the adjustments.
Yes, we can put both once they've changed, and we can also put the proposed or upcoming rules in.
Excellent. Samantha, those are really the kind of the last few questions are asking the same one.
Perfect. Well, thanks for co-piloting there. Not sure why I can't see the questions, but they all are quite excellent. So what I would say, since we are at the end of our time, is just a thank you for those who signed on and joined us today. Compliance obviously top of mind and something that is near and dear to our hearts at Nacha, and certainly Rohin and his team. So we appreciate your time in terms of joining us for the webinar, and also want to thank, of course, Rohin and Jen, as well as Carrie Sellen for sharing your thoughts. Just a last housekeeping note to include here is that if you are on today or you signed up today and you want to see a much more robust demo and really pepper Rohin and Jen with the hard questions on what the product can do, there will certainly be an opportunity to do so after the webinar. And when we send you the recording, we'll send you their contact information, and you can certainly follow up with them directly if you'd like to see more. But again, I thank everybody for the time today. Thank you, Luis, for again the co-piloting. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.